So my favorite memories of my father and me when growing up were all around cars. Washing cars, waxing cars, fixing cars, driving cars, racing cars, arguing about cars. Cars were where my father and me found common ground. My dad was a hard guy to get to know. He was a doctor. He was up in his head a lot. He was very private. He was hard to reach. And I was an oldest son longing for connection. I wanted to feel like I meant something and I belonged. And I got that feeling when my father invited me into the garage to be his little assistant mechanic, working on cars, jacking the car up, pulling the tires off, changing the brake pads, changing spark plugs, changing the oil. That's when I felt like I meant something to him and that I was wanted and I was on the same page with him. Cars were where we had our common ground. For some kids, it's playing a game of catch. For my dad and me, it was cars. My favorite thing of all was when he would bring me along, invite me into his 65 Corvette Stingray. Only 2 seats, so my mom couldn't come, my little brothers couldn't come, it was just the 2 of us in a capsule driving straight into the future with 450 horsepower in the car. He would rev the engine, pull up to a stoplight, put the car in gear, and then drop the clutch, and all hell would break loose. The rear end would shimmy and shake and move around. He'd be clutching the steering wheel, trying to keep it straight, going down the road, and it just sounded like we were inside of a volcano erupting. And he would take me on these 0 to 60 romps, and it felt terrifying and beautiful, and I felt alive, and I felt like I was part of something beautiful. But little boys don't stay little boys forever. I became a teenager, started to develop my own personality, my own views on the world, and my own critical take on my father. Over time, my parents were slowly working their way towards a divorce. And I kind of thought my father was to blame for it. He wasn't supportive, he wasn't loving, he wasn't empowering of her. And so I switched my alliances from my father to my mother. My father and I started spending less time together. I went off to college. We had differing political point of view. And then I went to the West Coast to start my career as a writer and a musician. We didn't see each other more than once a year. And we sure weren't driving cars together anymore. But then something changed when my father was diagnosed with cancer. He was given a year or 2 to live, they thought. I knew I had to find a way back to my father. Our differences be damned. I knew it had to be through cars. So my dad beat cancer for a bit, and he was starting to race cars on weekends again. And I said to him, Dad, I want you to take me car racing with you. I want you to teach me how to do what you do. I want you to teach me on the racetracks of New England, whatever you do. I want to learn from you. He brought me out 5 or 6 weekends a year. That's what we did. We didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about my mom. We didn't talk about relationships. We just talked about cars. We were back on the same page again. And he taught me so well, I finally got to beat him at his own game on the racetracks of New England. And he was so generous. At one point, one of my albums as a musician was blowing up, and I had to do a national tour. But I was living in New York City, and I didn't have a car. He loaned me one of his cars, like the Giving Tree. It was a Honda Pilot, mediocre SUV. But I drove it all around the country, played all these shows, and at one point, I found the best driving road I've ever been on. It was this windy, twisty road in northern Maine, and if you're a driver, it was banked turns, it was along a river, and there was a sunset over there, and cows out the window over here. It was just the perfect driving road. I called my dad up. I'm like, Dad, we got to drive this road one day. It's going to be amazing. And the years started going by, and I wasn't making it happen. Finally, I called him up. Dad, what about this weekend? Is this the time to do it? Is this the time? He's like, yes, I'm free. And I just got a new sports car. So I went up, we started our day, and we began our trek towards, is that my timer? I can't tell. All right. We began our trek towards the northern edges of the state, and we had to get to Freiburg, Maine. We drove through all these amazing towns. We retraced the steps of our family's life over the years. Finally, I said, Dad, the road begins in Freiburg, Maine. Here we go. We're going to begin here. We got to the intersection, and I couldn't remember what road it was. I was so sure I would. I was like, it's probably this one. Let's go this way for 10 miles. That wasn't it. Let's go this way for 10 miles. That wasn't it. I couldn't find the goddamn road. I built my whole life towards this. This is all about our connection and it's all falling apart. Finally, we were running out of time. We had to go back. Our dinner was waiting for us. My stepmother Mary was waiting, and my dad's like, well, Mark, we could always just take Route 219. It's got a lot of twisties. It's a beautiful road. I think you'll like it. I was like, fine, we'll take this 219 road, whatever, it's not as good as mine, but we'll take it. We start driving down this road, We get about a mile into it. I realize this is the road. This is the same road I've had. Dad, you found the same road. This was the road I found 10 years ago. We were miles apart in our beliefs. We were 30 years apart in age, but we believed in the same road. We had the same common ground. We had one crystal beautiful thing we both loved in this world. For the next hour and a half, we drove the twisties. We cranked up Boston's Don't Look Back on the stereo. We floored the engine. We leaned into the G-forces. We traded off driving positions. We had the perfect drive. We got home and we hugged it out in the driveway, and we were reconnected like father and child when I was a kid again. So my takeaway from all of it is, if you have a father or a parent or a sibling in your life you don't see eye to eye with, chances are there's some road you do share in common. It might be baseball, might be a pastime, favorite book, favorite movie, favorite song, but find that road and drive it as often as you can.